Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's show. It's my favorite time of year and it is bow season. So this week we really want to dedicate the show as far as getting more people that don't have the chance to hunt a lot more involved with bow hunting and to teach you guys and gals a lot about the secrets of bow hunting. We've got Michael first up from Rivers Edge Treestands. I consider him an expert. He's got his son Marco with him. Pat really just got into bow hunting a couple years ago. And you know what, Jim is a longtime hunter. So we've got a really interesting crew here. Let's see what we can teach you guys.
It's kind of hard to believe, but I've been hunting for 35 years. And my son here is 11 and he's been hunting for a few years. He's shot a few deer. He's bow hunted actually with the crossbow for a couple years now. He has yet to kill one with the bow. Had a number of close calls already, but nothing's actually come together and he hasn't released an arrow on one yet. So here in a minute, we're gonna go over some of the gear that we're using. Try to keep it simple, not make it too complicated, through the details and why we made the selections we did for this hunt today. We're using a crossbow. This is a Raven. You know, it's a pretty high-end, high-energy crossbow. The one thing that people don't talk about enough, everyone likes to talk about the crossbow itself. They want to talk about the broadhead. The most important gear is the arrow itself. Now, if you're gonna you have to put money into something, this is what you want to put money into. The straightest crossbow bolts you can buy and have a lighted knock. The lighted knock is awesome with a crossbow because a lot of times those shots come, you know, later in the afternoon, but with a lighted knock, you can usually figure out your impact point, and without it, you can't. As far as broadheads go, I use a fixed blade, replaceable blade broadhead, and I like fixed blade because nothing can go wrong with them, and it's super simple, and I can practice with the exact bolt that I actually shoot at the deer. So you want that broadhead to be absolutely as sharp as possible, so I only use brand new broadheads or broadheads with brand new blades. I never actually killed a deer until I was 16 years old. It was more than ethical for me to be in the woods, but you know, each kid is going to be different. Some kids are going to be ready at 11 years old to be shooting that vertical bow. You know, it might take till they're 13, 14, 15 years old before they're really ready if they're committed to shooting a vertical bow. So I'd rather him hunt with a crossbow, have some success, extends his range a little bit. We're going to use a tripod today. So we're actually using a tripod. We're getting a really stable rest for that crossbow. We're hunting out of a blind. He's got all the advantages in the world when that deer does come out, that he can make a good clean shot, and it can be a good experience for him because it's not a good experience to wound deer. If he was out there with a vertical bow, I'd be kind of setting him up for failure, and I don't want to do that. I got a lot of stuff in my bino harness here, and Marco actually has a little bino pack too. He's got a little pair of Vortex in here of his own. And one thing I carry in my bino harness and Marco has in here is his tag, making sure that he knows all the rules and follows those rules. And I carry zip ties. I got the Vortex Fury so I can range find for Marco, so I can tell him when he's on that crossbow exactly how far away that deer is, and he can make a good clean shot. Wind indicator, I got both powder and then I actually carry milkweed in the side of it. So I just carry some old milkweed and I drop that out so I know what's the wind direction. A lot of little essentials in my bino harness, and I know I always have that with me so that I never forget that stuff. I guess I carry a lot of lights. I didn't realize how many lights I carry. This is a great big DeWalt spotlight. This is great for blood trailing. I got my knife for gutting deer, flashlight. This is also good. That way Marco can have his own little flashlight, and I carry a headlamp, and Marco carries his own headlamp. So I'm going to take off one of these brand new broadheads that I'm going to use for hunting and swap it out for an older dull broadhead of the exact same kind, and we're going to shoot it and see if he's hitting a bullseye like he always does. It's a relatively easy thing compared to shooting a vertical bow, but there's still some challenges with it. In particular, the trigger on a crossbow, there's a lot of pull force on those triggers, and there's quite a bit of trigger travel. And I know that across all crossbows. I think they have to do that for safety reasons. So good trigger control is the most important thing to shooting a crossbow. Slow, steady pressure until that shot surprises you. Marco's an expert at that, and he'll show you how it's done. I don't know, that looks like a dead deer, huh? Looks like you got it right in the center. You can see that lighted knock really nice too. So one thing to always remember when you're crossbow hunting is that you have to actually have a plan for uncocking your crossbow at the end of the night. Now the one I'm using, you can actually wind it down and uncock it by hand, but a lot of them you actually got to shoot them. So you got to carry a target in your truck or whatever and discharge that bolt into a target. So just make sure you got a plan so you're not carrying a cocked crossbow in your vehicle. So we got a 3D target here in Larry's lawn out here. I think this is, how many points are on that, Marco? That must be about 22 pointer, something like that. Hey, you got a perfectly broadside deer, Marco. Where's your aiming point?
I think I'm gonna aim like right about here.
One thing you want to note is where the shoulder blade sits. So the shoulder blade starts here and it kind of forms a triangle and it comes back here. A lot of guys are afraid to hit the shoulder blade, but you know, just to know exactly where that is. So the kill zone actually starts about here and the lungs end way back here. So you kind of want to be right in the middle of it, because you hit on a broadside deer, you hit anywhere in there, you're going to double lung that deer and it's going to be a short blood trail. So you want to aim right in the middle of that, usually about 40% of the way up the body. So about 40% on the bottom and about 60% on top is where you want to aim. You got to be aware of shot angles, right? So if you got a deer quartering away, you're going to want to move that back. A good thing to remember is always look at that opposite side leg, and you want to line your shot up with the back of the opposite side leg when you make a quartering away shot. It can be quartering at you a tiny bit if you're confident in your marksmanship. Then you want to move that point of aim just a little bit forward so that you don't just one lung them and get a gut shot. So one of the questions I've been asked is, what do I do for scent control? I'll tell you what, it's a tough situation. It's 80 degrees. I don't care what the situation is. When it's 80 degrees, you're going to leave some scent in the woods. You can't 100% eliminate scent. And I like to keep things simple. I just showered before we came out here, so I'm nice and clean. Ask Marco to do the same. Oral hygiene is important. Make sure you're just as clean as can be, and then just, he's actually going to hunt in shorts tonight because we got to stay cool and try to sweat less, right? So it's a difficult situation where we're in dark t-shirts so that we can blend in the black blind as well as we can. But I think we're just about ready here to get headed out. So see you in the blind.
People that don't have a lot of experience, what are the keys that you figure what made you so successful? And let's talk about the bow hunting then.
Yeah, I don't have many hobbies, so when I do find something I love, I tend to go overboard with it, which I have with bow hunting. Just something as basic as the wind, as I feel has been the most important. If you're gonna hunt and your wind's blowing right to where you're trying to hunt, you're probably not gonna see anything, and you might see a yearling or something like that. But that's the one thing that I've really learned the most on, is your scent.
Detail to that wind.
Is the wind. And you don't need nothing special to look at the wind.
You shoot a lot. Like, you know, you're shooting X amount of arrows a night, weeks, maybe months before bow hunting actually even gets here. You know that when you put that bow up, you have such confidence that you know that arrow is going to land on that mark.
Yeah, I enjoy shooting just as much as hunting. When that time comes where that trophy does walk in front of me, I want to put all the cards on my side. You know, when I used to hunt 20 years ago, I didn't do that. And now, you know, I feel confident every time I go into the woods, and it is enjoyable, and you're learning and you're getting better at something.
Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Jim from Ackert Archery, and you know, you've been bow hunting a long time. There's something on your bow that I'm a firm believer in using, and there's a reason for it. So let's talk about that.
Add a camera to your bow. It is one more thing that you have to think about before you put your, hook onto your string. You got to turn it on. But when you're shooting at that animal and it happens so fast and your adrenaline is so high at the time that a lot of times it's hard to tell, even with a lighted nock, did I make the shot that I think I made? Where you can now literally look at, okay, was my shot placement excellent so that I can get down and go find that animal because he didn't go far? Or do I need to back out and wait a few hours? It kind of lets you know whether or not, because you don't want to bump the deer. We've all done it. It's probably the worst feeling ever. It's like, okay, I thought I made a good shot, and you go look for it, and you hear it get up and take off, and
you never see it again.
That deer is never to be seen again. And you know what? It didn't probably survive, but it was because you didn't have a good way of looking at your shot placement. And when you think that you're going to wait an hour, look at your phone and mark that time, because 15 minutes seems like you waited an hour, and you did not.
You're right about that.
And you need to wait.
Jimmy.
Thanks, man.
Let's go hunt.
Yeah, so we're headed to the blind here. It's about 3 hours before shooting light ends for the day, so there's not a ton of time. Usually I like to get out a little earlier than this, but it being so incredibly hot, I just don't think the deer are going to be moving very early tonight. 4 hours is kind of my rule of thumb, but on a day like today, just being that it's just a bright, sunny, clear sky day, and it being so warm out, we're heading out about an hour later than I'd normally like to. We're hundreds of yards away from the blind yet, but I think Marco knows we've been through this enough that we don't talk, right? Once we leave the ATV here, or once we leave the road, if we do talk, it's going to be at a very low whisper, and we're probably not going to talk because we all know what we're supposed to do, and we're going to try to get into that blind as quietly and as quickly as possible without making any noise.
We made it into this cage blind, and this is a great setup for a crossbow hunter, especially when you got, now we're filming, so we have even less room here, but the more you hunt out of blinds, the more you realize that light is your enemy, and you're trying to eliminate as much light inside your blind as possible. So you want to keep that blind incredibly dark, and that's one of the advantages of the cage blind. It's got coverings on all the zippers, so light doesn't even come through the zippers. If you close everything in here, it's pitch black. So with the vertical window opening, this allows Marco to actually get the angle he needs on the crossbow to actually make a kill shot on an animal that's about 5 yards away if they get that close. So when you're in a blind like this and you got a little time to kill, it's a good idea to check out some of the rules and make sure you're familiar with them. So one good thing to do when you get into a blind is to just check a couple landmarks. We got a couple trees out in front of us. You can look at, like a real dark shrub or something that's out there. But it's good to familiarize yourself and to know like where your shooting range is, right? So it's good to know where that 50 yards is about out in the field, so that you're not getting, you know when a deer's out of range or when a deer is in range, so that you know when you got to get ready to shoot. So good thing to do when you get to a blind is check a bunch of ranges, make some mental notes about the landmarks out in front of you.
Good morning. Oh, 5:15. Shoot a doe or a big buck. There's morning people, and then there's not.
The deer are right here in the yard. Hopefully they're near the blind we're hunting.
This is a different spot. We sat over a food plot last night. Never did get anything close to a blind that we could actually get a shot at. 10 minutes in the shooting light, and we had a nice doe come by at exactly 40 yards, and looks like Marco made a good shot on that one. The first one's, I think it was a good shot as well, but it was a little bit harder to see exactly where he hit it, exactly the angle of the deer. So when you're in these situations, you might think you made a perfect shot, and we do on both these deer, but you still want to give them a little time. There's no rush. Take your time, calm down, get your adrenaline back down so that you make bad decisions. Anyways, I hope we get out of the blind here, and there's a couple of short blood trails, but I think there will be.
It's a lot easier for one person to stay where the shot was fired from and one person to go look than it is for you both to go look, because it's going to be tough to find the bolt in this tall grass. But we got the best chance if I can line him up perfectly with where that deer was standing, and then he can look for it. Keep following. Right here, right through there. Right here. One down. Let's get this one gutted, tagged, and then we will go find the other one. Come around.
Your first 2 deer with the bow. That's killer, man.
Yep. What I like to do when I gut a deer, and Marco actually got us to this part, but I'm going to show him a little trick here, is he actually just went through the hide, just barely cutting in, using a knife from the inside out, without puncturing any of the main gut cavity. So now what I like to do is make a little incision, right at the sternum. So what I like to do is I actually like to get my entire hand in there, and I push that gut down. She's already bloated a little bit, even though it's only been a couple hours. I use my entire hand just instead of my fingers to make space so that I don't puncture the gut. So we found both of them. Actually longer blood trails than we expected. She was double lunged, and the other one was, I believe, double lunged as well, but went close to 200 yards. But They were both bleeding pretty good, so they weren't too hard to follow, and we were able to find them pretty quickly. So it's going to be over 80 degrees today, and we got to get these taken care of so that these flies aren't laying eggs and being disgusting. But this is a bad situation. Larry went to run and get the ATV, and we got to get these things taken care of quickly.
Hey everybody, this week's tip of the week brought to you by our good friends up at Mike's Country Meats, the finest jerky on the planet. Got the cage right here, blind. What I did is I left the bag for the blind up there where the steaks and some of the other stuff were in there, and the mice got in there and chewed everything up and urinated all over it. And that is a huge thing. When it comes to any kind of permanent blind or any blind in itself, never leave anything there that the mice can make a nest out of, because I'll tell you what, it is a mess. Hey, this week's tip of the week, again, brought to you by our good friends up at Mike's Country Meats, the finest jerky on the planet.
So I like to call this who hash. It's kind of a little bit of everything to get things, get everybody energized for the rest of the day. Beer, butter, and onion brats mixed with some fresh onions, some red potatoes, some seasonings, and the brat itself has a wonderful beer flavor. Leroy's Meats, best meats in town.
What you do before the season starts is probably going to dictate your level of success more than anything else. You know, if you're just getting into this, the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out how to scout. Right after the snow's melting, before all the foliage is on the trees, because the woods kind of looks like it does in the fall, and you can still see a lot of that fall sign, the rubs and the scrapes from the season before.
I like to have multiple stand locations so I can hunt on any wind, because not everyone can just go hunt whenever the wind's right. So if you have, 3 to 4 different locations and then have like a mobile setup, set up for the right winds, and it's good to have different locations.
Probably one of the number one mistakes people make is not really thinking through their approach into a stand, because they're busting the deer out, or they're giving up their wind before they ever get to the stand. Sometimes you got to walk a lot longer in order to get into a good spot, and that applies whether private land or public land.
I'll go to one of the stands where I think would be good, and I'll go on like my Onyx or HuntWise app, and I'll set the right winds on there so I can always tell. And then obviously you can look at a weather app and see what winds they're supposed to get, but if you're in different elevation areas, that wind can swirl. So I like to, grass or just something when you're going in so you can pick the right stand.
Especially terrain like this where you got a lot of topography. On a north wind, you might notice that, hey, that wind is in this little valley is actually cutting to the east or whatever, and you can actually figure that out while you're scouting and make notes of that. So one question that comes up all the time is trail cameras. Well, one of the biggest mistakes I think people make is using trail cameras too much and relying too much on trail cameras. There's still no substitute for actual boots on the ground scouting. Just because you're not seeing something on trail camera doesn't mean that there's not deer there that you should be hunting. I like to sell cameras because you're not disturbing your hunting property. Put a trail camera out there and leave it. And don't rely on it too much for hunting. What you should really be relying on with your trail cameras is early season scouting and scouting for next year, learning the lay of the land, how the deer move through that land, what food sources they're hitting and when, and use that as a memory bank to learn the property over time. But you got to make sure you're not pressuring the deer. That's the biggest thing that I think people make a mistake with trail cameras, is that because they're constantly replacing them, messing with them, going into their hunting spots without actually hunting to check on them, that they're actually ruining their hunting spots. The easiest way for a hunter to get into hunting is actually using just a regular pop-up portable blind, like a baronet blind. It gives you the shielding. You can use a stand like we're talking with the Crossbow. You can hunt a couple people in there without having to worry so much about movement and that sort of thing. So I think just a pop-up blind is one of the best tools for a true beginner. But one tip about those is that it is good with deer to get them into whatever location you're going to be hunting maybe a week before you're going to hunt them.
Just let them kind of blend in a little bit, let the animals get used to that obviously new object that's in their home.
I think a lot of people start in tree stands, right? But hunting out of a tree stand presents its own unique challenges. And I think hunting out of a ground blind for a beginning hunter, especially if you got youth getting into it or whatever, is a better choice for an absolute beginner.
Last week when I was up here, the deer were on the food plots like crazy. We were coming out, and all the deer we saw were in the soybeans. They had nothing to do really with the food plots. All they were doing is a few deer were using it to pass through. And let's talk about that, how quickly that changes.
So the last time we hunted here, it was all corn, right? So
right.
The food plots were just a magnet for the deer because they didn't have all this food source that we have behind us here. But just in the last week, these beans are drying down, and there's really very few things out in the woods that a deer likes more than dry soybeans. You saw a lot of deer, but they're kind of scattered like seeds.
Now, let's talk about water.
Yeah, if you got private land and you can actually put a water hole on it, it depends on the situation. My experience is that you don't necessarily want your water hole next to food, you want your water hole next to their bedding. So if you got a spot where you know you're hunting close or near bedding, that's a great spot for a water hole. Earth ponds are really nice, but if you're looking to do it on a little bit tighter budget, those kettle waterers work too. Almost every single time a deer will go to that water, and sometimes they don't even drink. I don't know what it is, but they are drawn to that water, and so it's a great way for an archery hunter to get a deer to go to a predictable location so you can actually get a shot.
Hey Michael, I want to thank you and
Thanks.
Marco for everything, along with Pat and Jim for all the great things that they've helped me out with this week. It's not about the kill, it's about what you learn and the things that you love to do. Hey everybody, like we do each and every week, I want to thank all of our military men and women for the great service they have given this country and continue to give this country, along with all of our firefighters and paramedics, and no doubt all of our law enforcement agents. Hey, it is a great day to be alive, you guys, and we'll see you guys and gals again next week, and thanks for joining us.